Hi, welcome to St Stephen's Church Online. I'm Josh, the youth pastor at St Stephen's, really happy to be leading you through this service. Now today we actually have a one-off talk that is not part of another series with the amazing Inga Linero speaking on the keys to kingdom outcomes. Now I'm not going to give any more spoilers, you're just going to have to wait until she shares. But before she does and before we start worship, I've got a couple of things to share with you that we are doing in person as a church. The first is that if you're watching on the day this comes out, March 13th, then it's the last day for a discount ticket to Focus. Now, if you've never been to Focus, it's a summer festival with the HTB network. If you come, there's guaranteed to be amazing teaching and worship. But even more powerful for me is the time we have together as our church, but also as part of the wider church. And then the next thing is that we are really excited about our upcoming Kingdom Come night on Friday, March 25th. The band will be leading us in worship, interspersed with moments for prayer, encounter and prophecy. This is a great opportunity for us to come together and focus on God. Please see the website to sign up and for more details. Okay, it's time to worship. And actually, the song we're going to sing is called Graves into Gardens. It may be new to you, but it's a really great worship song which celebrates the transformational power of Jesus. So as we sing, I want to ask God that he would show us this transformational power as we allow him to speak to us and allow him to have authority in our lives. So come, Lord Jesus.
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together. Every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than you. Not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all. You still call me friend, 'cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than you. Turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. Turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You
Hi, I'm Inger, and I have always loved old rusty antique keys. I love to imagine the doors that they once opened. I once went to an antiques market in Paris with my husband Henrik and found a shop with thousands of old rusty keys. I quite literally could have spent all day there. Henrik showed an admirable amount of patience. Fast forward a few years, around the time my husband was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. This was 2016, and on my way home one day, I found 7 small rusty keys in the street. For a moment, I thought I must be dreaming. I had to look around. There was no one else there who might have dropped the keys, so I picked them all up from the middle of the street, and I still marvel at finding them during that battle. An encouragement from God, I felt, to keep praying. I've always loved the idea that God might give us spiritual keys that unlock situations, releasing heavenly outcomes. When I first started collecting keys and giving them to people as encouragements, I had no idea the journey God would take me on. The Lord has allowed us to see the most extraordinary things happen. But I still feel like a total beginner. I cannot claim to know much, but I would love to share a few things about keys God gives, the parts He calls us to play together with others, and the seismic shifts that can happen as a result. There are 3 places in the Bible where we hear about divine keys, 3 verses found in Isaiah, Matthew, and the book of Revelation, and they sound almost identical. The only difference is the holder of the key in each case. One of these instances can be found in Matthew 16, verse 9, where Jesus says to Peter, "I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Now, it sounds so poetic and mysterious, but how do heavenly keys help? It seems rather ethereal. So I'd love to illustrate how they actually are the opposite. They are keys that trigger dramatic outcomes. And I want to do this by sharing my number 1 favorite Old Testament war story, which plays out around 700 BC. And while I do, watch for the moment the keys from heaven arrive. Now, this is the story of when the king of the empire of Assyria, King Sennacherib, ravages the tiny country of Judah and finally arrives to conquer its capital city, Jerusalem. It's called the Siege of Jerusalem, and it was truly a humanly impossible situation that Jerusalem found itself in, a kind of David and Goliath story, but on a much bigger scale. There are 5 characters we need to keep straight here. On one side, we have the tiny nation of Judah, with King Hezekiah, who lives in Jerusalem, his officials and administrators, Shebna and Eliakim, and Isaiah, the famous prophet of God. On the other side, we have the vast empire of Assyria, with King Sennacherib, king of Assyria, a great intimidator and conqueror of his day, plus his undefeated army of 185,000 soldiers. Sennacherib, this Assyrian aggressor, records the account of the siege of Jerusalem himself in his annals. Archaeologists discovered these annals quite recently during the 20th century, and they ended up finding 3 identical copies of Sennacherib's own description of the siege, which can be viewed in museums in London, Chicago, and Jerusalem to this day. So, would you like to hear King Sennacherib of Assyria in his own words? Sennacherib writes, "As for the king of Judah, Hezekiah, who had not submitted to my authority, I besieged and captured 46 of his fortified cities, along with many smaller towns taken in battle with my battering rams. I took as plunder 200,150 people, both small and great, male and female, along with a great number of animals, including horses, mules, donkeys, camels, oxen, and sheep. As for Hezekiah, I shut him up like a caged bird in his royal city of Jerusalem. I then constructed a series of fortresses around him, and I did not allow anyone to come out of the city gates. Basically, King Sennacherib of Assyria was the Putin of his day, putting immense pressure on Jerusalem. So Jerusalem was under siege, and they faced the prospect of starving to death unless they surrendered to the Assyrian army. Watching the war in Ukraine unfold, it's not so difficult to imagine the intense pressure King Hezekiah and the people of Jerusalem were under, which we can also read about in the Old Testament. This is what happens. In the face of overwhelming threat and daily taunts from the captain of the Assyrian army to cause the people of Jerusalem to lose heart, King Hezekiah goes to the temple and pours out his heart to God, saying, "Lord, do you hear what the Assyrians are saying about you?" And the Lord responds. He makes a promise to King Hezekiah through Isaiah the prophet that the Assyrians will never set foot in Jerusalem, and their king, Sennacherib, will return where he came from. Then, in the night, an angel of the Lord slays the whole Assyrian army, all 185,000 of them, and Sennacherib returns back to Nineveh where he came from. Eventually, one of his own sons murders him there. You could call it the end. But there is an important backstory in Jerusalem, which is the key to understanding this in a meaningful way for us. Before this dramatic rescue of Jerusalem has taken place, before we know the deliverance of God from a hopeless situation, we find King Hezekiah and his officials in Jerusalem. The territories and cities around Jerusalem are being ravaged, and the people of Jerusalem are getting anxious. It's their turn next. The officials of the city survey the fortified walls of Jerusalem and find significant weaknesses, even gaps, and they're considering their options. But there is something they are not seeing. The people of Judah have forgotten God. Probably not about his existence, but who he is. They have forgotten his powerful and faithful character. And so they do not take God into account as this intimidating army approaches. Because they have forgotten God, they try to fix the problem themselves. They begin tearing down houses in the city to reuse the stones to fill the gaps in the walls of Jerusalem, but they soon realize it's not going to make much of a difference. So what do? Their next approach is, "Let us eat and drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die." They decide to live it up. This is unforgivable according to the Lord. He says, "Till your dying day, the sin will not be atoned for." Finally, we get to Hezekiah's palace administrator, Shebna, who is meant to be a leader. In fact, he's the second most powerful man after the king. Now he can be found cutting out a resting place for himself. In other words, he makes a grave. And the Lord asks Shebna what in the world he's doing. Because of Shebna's defeatist, godless response to the Assyrian threat, he will lose his position. The Lord says to Shebna, "I will clothe Eliakim with your robe and fasten your sash around him and hand your authority over to him. He will be a father to those who live in Jerusalem and to the people of Judah." And here we come to those famous lines about keys. "I will place on his shoulder the key to the house of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open." So when Jerusalem finally faces the terrifying Assyrian army and King Sennacherib, we find that Eliakim, who has not lost his faith in God, has now been elevated to the role of palace administrator. And what a difference it makes to the way that the story turns out. Eliakim's faith kickstarts a series of events which turns the battle around, very much like an immune system response. Now, we can all experience all kinds of battles. Sometimes the invader armies come in the form of microscopic cells. During the time my husband had acute myeloid leukemia and my dad had lung cancer, I started to learn a little bit about the physical defense system, the immune system, and I find it's an interesting analogy. An immune system response is an incredibly complex, intricate process which actually starts with a lock and key scenario, which sets in motion a series of actions from various immune system parts, like a team that neutralizes viruses, bacteria, fungi, and parasites. Now, these dangerous invaders are called pathogens. But also, the immune system deals with human cells which are faulty and replicating in dangerous ways, like cancer. This is amazing when it works, but lethal when it doesn't. In the case of Jerusalem, the spiritual pathogen that was replicating in the city before the siege was unbelief. There was no faith in the city under Shebna's leadership. Shebna wasn't leading the people of Jerusalem into the truth about the God who would save them if they called on his name. And things were going from bad to worse. So the Lord brings in someone else with a key to kickstart a powerful defense. It was King Hezekiah that prayed that powerful prayer in the temple, which God answered. And so it's easy to assume that King Hezekiah of Judah was a man of great faith. But if we know anything about King Hezekiah of Judah, the stories about him do not give the most favorable impression. He believed God, but he comes across at times as self-pitying, unwise, and self-centered. And let's not forget that while Shebna was King Hezekiah's palace administrator, it really doesn't sound like anyone was calling on the Lord. The turning point doesn't actually start with King Hezekiah, but when Eliakim is in place, the one who had been given the keys from the Lord and the authority to open and shut doors because of his faith. Reading between the lines, Eliakim gives King Hezekiah the hope he needs to call on the Lord in the temple. Because of that prayer, the Lord then speaks to the prophet Isaiah, who releases a word over the situation, declaring God's intentions, and then the angel is sent in the night. Just like an immune response, there are a number of people who play their part in immobilizing, literally, the attack on Jerusalem. Eliakim was promised the keys to the house of David, and that is what happened. Once the angel of the Lord dealt with the Assyrian army and the siege was over, the doors to Jerusalem were once again opened so that people could come and go. But the doors to Jerusalem were closed to Sennacherib and his army in a very permanent way. They never set foot in that city. This is a story about the keys God gives. The Lord is still giving keys today. His heart is that impossible situations be unlocked. Let us believe his good character. He is faithful and true and has solutions for every human dilemma, whether it is one person's struggle or terrifying wars between nations. Wait on him. He is willing to speak. It is also a story about the parts he calls us to play together with others. The Lord has always intended that we would play our part. He gives us the deepest respect for our personal integrity. He will not override us. He does not take over and do it for us when we do not step up to the plate. It is God's intention to form a solid immune system around this nation and around all nations against the devil who comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Let us give God our wholehearted yes. Yes, Lord, send me. I am yours. Finally, it's a story about the seismic shifts that can happen as a result of people's faith in God. Because there is no situation so chaotic that God cannot, from that situation, create something surpassingly good, in the words of Bishop Mull. We saw in our own family, the Lord give us keys to pray for both my husband and my dad, who were both dying. God fully restored them, even miraculously healed overnight, as we walked with the Lord into his plans for them. Miracles happen all the time. Let us have faith that God has a solution, even for impossible situations like the war in Ukraine, and ask him for the keys to unlock door after door. Let us turn our attention to the Lord. You may want to close your eyes where you are and picture Jesus as our King who rides before us in battle. The Bible teaches us to recognize that the world is a battleground, not a playground. But on that battleground, God does not leave us alone or defenseless, because he is the God who never leaves or forsakes. He is the God who does not remain safely in his office while he sends us into battle. No, Jesus rides ahead of us to lead us into battle against the enemy who comes only to kill, steal, and destroy. Jesus is no ordinary king who might or might not win. He will win. He leads us into certain victory. The battle is his. The plan is his. And we are invited to be part of his plan. During a few moments of silence now, and we take the opportunity to recommit ourselves to him, to surrender to him at a deeper level than we have ever done before, to truly give ourselves to him. He only is able to reveal to you who he made you to be. He only knows the difference he has planned for you to make in this time of history. The prayers he's calling you to pray, which he intends to answer. Those kinds of prayers we need to receive from him so that we can see doors opening which no man can shut, and doors shutting which no man can open. Let us just take a few moments in silence where we are right now to just engage with the Lord, to interact with him. His eyes are roaming throughout the world, looking for people whose hearts are fully committed to him. His eyes are roaming right now. Is your heart fully committed to me? Trust me. Trust me. You can trust me. We cannot trust the Lord to fulfill the outcomes the way that we imagine they should be fulfilled. But we can trust him to fulfill his good purposes. And we can trust him that his plans and his purposes are far, far, far greater than our own. Can we commit ourselves to trusting him in that way. The rewards for those who do are unimaginable. There is no one like you, Lord. The kingdom is yours. The power is yours. And the glory is yours. Father, would you help us to commit to you in such a way, trust you in such a way that we do not take any of that for ourselves, but we live for a much higher purpose than ourselves, and that is living for you, that we might see your kingdom come and your will be done in this world as it is in heaven. Amen.
Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, naught be all else to me save that thou art, thou my best thought by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom, be thou my true worth, I ever with thee and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, and I thy true Son, thou in me dwelling, and I with thee one. Be thou my shield and my sword for the fight, be thou my dignity, be thou my might, thou my soul's shelter, and thou my high tower. Raise thou me heavenward, O power of my power. Riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Thou mine inheritance now and always. Thou and thou only be first in my heart. High King of heaven, my treasure thou art. High King of heaven, when victory is won, may I reach heaven's joys, O bright and sun. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all.
Thanks so much for watching our online service. I feel really honoured that you would share your time with us, and I hope that you are blessed by being a part of this. See you soon. Bye.